Master the psychology of powerful communication. Vertical Audiobook. Welke Audiobook, where we unlock the timeless wisdom that shapes our lives. Today, we embark on a journey that will redefine your understanding of human connection and influence. Most people mistakenly believe that communication is solely about the words they utter. But here is the brutal truth. The words that come out of your mouth represent less than 10% of your actual influence. The other 90% is psychology, strategy, and a profound understanding of how the human brain processes information. Communication is the quiet power that decides who gets heard, who gets respected, and who gets remembered. The difference between a brilliant idea and an idea that is utterly ignored often comes down to how it was communicated. You can possess immense talent, deep knowledge, or unyielding ambition, but if you cannot express it clearly, confidently, and intelligently, the world may never notice it. This is not about being born with a silver tongue. The ability to speak smart is not a gift. It is a skill, and like any valuable skill, it can be learned, strengthened, and mastered. You have probably observed this phenomenon yourself. Someone who is not necessarily the smartest person in the room, yet somehow everyone listens to them. They seem to get promoted faster, close bigger deals, and effortlessly influence others. Meanwhile, brilliant individuals with amazing ideas are overlooked, underestimated, and ignored. The fundamental difference is not intelligence or luck. It is communication mastery, a systematic approach to connecting with human psychology. Every interaction in life is built on communication. When you ask for an opportunity, when you lead a team, when you negotiate a salary, when you connect with someone you care about, when you defend your boundaries, and even when you choose to stay silent, you are communicating. The quality of your communication shapes the quality of your relationships, your reputation, your credibility, and eventually, your destiny. What makes communication powerful is not just the words you choose, but the intricate psychology behind them. Humans respond to tone, presence, emotion, rhythm, clarity, and intent. They are influenced by how you make them feel, how you make them think, and how you make them see themselves. When you learn to speak smart, you do not just talk well, you influence outcomes. In this audiobook, Master the Psychology of Powerful Communication, we will explore the mental frameworks, emotional intelligence, and practical skills needed to communicate with clarity, confidence, and power. You will learn how to listen to influence, how to speak to be understood, how to persuade without force, how to build trust quickly, how to handle conflict calmly, and how to lead conversations with presence and intention. Communication is a lifelong advantage. It compounds, it travels, and it opens doors that talent alone cannot. These are not theoretical concepts to ponder. These are practical strategies to use immediately. Every technique we share has been proven in real-world situations, from boardrooms to first dates, from job interviews to family dinners. The psychology of communication is universal. And once you understand it, you will never struggle to be heard, respected, or influential again. By the time you finish, you will not just speak differently, you will think differently about every interaction you have. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The Mind's Blueprint. Train your thoughts before your words. Communication does not start when you open your mouth. It starts much earlier, in your mind. The words you speak are simply the surface layer of a deeper internal process. If the thinking beneath those words is unclear, rushed, reactive, or scattered, the communication that follows will be precisely the same. This is why some people feel profoundly misunderstood, even though they have said a great deal, and why others say very little, yet convey tremendous clarity and power. It begins with how they think. Before words, there is perception. Before sentences, there is intention. Before expression, there is awareness. As the Roman philosopher Seneca observed, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. So too, every effective conversation arises from the fertile ground of internal preparation. A strong communicator trains the mind the way a craftsman sharpens his tools. A dull tool makes the work harder, slower, and more painful. A sharp tool makes the same task cleaner, faster, and more effective. The mind works in an identical fashion. If you do not take the time to sharpen it, you will inevitably struggle in conversations that demand precision, presence, or influence. The first mental shift is clarity. Before you utter a single word, ask yourself, what am I really trying to communicate right now? What is the single most important message I want to convey? Most people speak without ever asking that crucial question. They rush to talk, rush to explain, rush to defend, rush to argue. But communication generously rewards those who pause, those who take a breath, those who meticulously organize their thoughts before they organize their words. When you know your intention, the words follow naturally, like a river finding its path. Without this internal clarity, you risk falling into reactive communication, a fatal mistake that sabotages influence before you even open your mouth. Reactive communicators use phrases like, "I think maybe," or "you are probably right," apologizing for having opinions, constantly seeking validation. This immediately positions them as followers, not leaders, signaling weakness and low status. The human brain is wired to respect certainty and authority. Reactive communication signals the opposite. The second mental shift is emotional regulation. Communication becomes profoundly difficult when the mind is hijacked by emotion. Anxiety makes us over-explain, burying our point under a deluge of unnecessary details. Ego makes us over-defend, turning a simple suggestion into a personal affront. Anger makes us over-attack, transforming dialogue into confrontation. Fear makes us underspeak, causing us to hold back crucial insights or defend our boundaries weakly. If you cannot control your emotional state, your words will end up serving your emotions instead of serving your purpose. Great communicators do not eliminate emotion, they process it. They step back internally and ask, what needs to be expressed and what needs to be managed? This internal pause creates distance, and distance gives you choice. Another key aspect of mental training is perspective taking. Communication is never one-directional. It always involves the listener. Before you speak, consider deeply how your message will land. How will it be heard? How will it be interpreted, given their background, biases, and current emotional state? How will it make the other person feel? The inexperienced communicator only focuses on what they want to say. The skilled communicator also considers what the other person is ready and able to hear. That small shift makes communication smoother, less hostile, and far more effective, fostering a sense of shared understanding rather than a one-sided declaration. There is also the matter of self-awareness. Many communication problems do not stem from a lack of vocabulary, intelligence, or knowledge. They come from blind spots in our own behavior. You might interrupt without noticing, speak too softly, explain too much, avoid eye contact, dominate the conversation, or habitually downplay your ideas. We all have unconscious patterns, and unless we examine them, those patterns will control us, undermining our influence and distorting our message. As the ancient Greek aphorism states, "Know thyself." Training the mind for communication is not about achieving perfection, but about cultivating awareness. It is about slowing down internally so that your external expression becomes more intentional, more deliberate. When the mind is calm, the words are clearer. When the mind is focused, the message is stronger. When the mind is steady, the listener feels that stability and is more receptive. So, Before you practice speaking techniques, before you try to persuade others, before you attempt to influence or lead, start with the internal environment. Train your mind to hold clarity. Train it to hold intention. Train it to manage emotion. Train it to observe patterns. Communication is not merely a skill of the mouth. It is a profound discipline of the mind. Master the mind first, and the words will follow, imbued with purpose and power. Chapter 2. The Silent Signals. Mastering Presence, Body Language, and First Impressions. Long before people analyze the words you say, they react to how you show up. Humans are constantly scanning for nonverbal cues, signs of confidence, signs of insecurity, signs of tension, signs of interest, signs of threat. You may be speaking calmly, but if your shoulders are tense and your voice is tight, the listener feels that tension. You may be delivering a logical argument, but if your face shows doubt, the listener senses uncertainty. Words tell part of the story. Tone, posture, pace, expression, and overall presence tell the rest. Communication is never just verbal. It is energetic, physical, and emotional. Your brain makes snap judgments about other people in less than 3 seconds. These judgments are incredibly difficult to change because they are not just social niceties, they are survival mechanisms. Understanding how these first impressions work gives you enormous power because you can consciously influence them instead of leaving them to chance. The human brain processes first impressions through multiple channels simultaneously: your appearance, posture, facial expressions, voice, tone, energy level, and initial words. Within seconds, people have decided whether you are competent, confident, trustworthy, high status, or low status. These thin-sliced judgments shape every subsequent interaction you have with them. The first element of powerful first impressions and ongoing nonverbal communication is physical presence. Before you say a single word, people are evaluating your posture, movement, and spatial awareness. Confident people take up appropriate space, move with purpose, and maintain steady, controlled movements. They do not fidget, rush, or make themselves smaller. Their physical presence communicates that they belong in the space and have every right to be there. Think of historical figures like Abraham Lincoln or Margaret Thatcher. Their physical bearing, though distinct, conveyed an unwavering resolve that preceded their spoken words. Physical presence starts with your posture. Stand or sit with your spine straight, shoulders back, and head level. This is not about being rigid. It is about being aligned and grounded. When your posture is strong and stable, it triggers unconscious associations with competence, leadership, and emotional control. Conversely, weak, collapsed, or fidgety posture signals insecurity, nervousness, and low confidence. Your movement patterns also communicate volumes about your internal state. Confident people move deliberately and smoothly. Their movements have purpose, direction, and control, signaling self-mastery. The second element is facial expression and eye contact. Your face is the most expressive part of your body, constantly read for emotional information. Confident communicators maintain relaxed, alert facial expressions that show engagement without being overly eager. They make appropriate eye contact, demonstrating interest and attention without aggression or invasiveness. Strong eye contact signals confidence, honesty, and engagement. The optimal pattern is to maintain eye contact for 3 to 5 second intervals while speaking and 4 to 6 second intervals while listening. Your facial expressions should match your internal emotional state and your intended message. If you are nervous but try to appear confident, the mismatch will be obvious, undermining your credibility. This is why emotional regulation, as discussed in the previous chapter, is so crucial. The third element is vocal quality and tone. Your voice carries enormous amounts of information about your emotional state confidence level, and social status. Within seconds, people make judgments about posture, authority, and trustworthiness based purely on how you sound. Confident voices are well supported by breath, creating a full, rich tone. They have controlled pace, showing thoughtfulness and intentionality. They have appropriate volume, demonstrating awareness of the space and audience, and clear articulation, signaling education and attention to detail. Many people unconsciously sabotage their vocal authority by speaking too quietly, speaking too quickly, or using uptalk, which makes statements sound like questions. These vocal patterns immediately lower your perceived status, regardless of your words. The pace of your speech also influences perception. Rushed sentences often make you seem nervous or overwhelmed. Speaking too slowly can make you sound hesitant or disengaged. The sweet spot is a pace that reflects clarity and confidence. Not rushed, not sluggish, simply intentional. An experienced communicator varies pace strategically, slower for emphasis, faster to convey energy, pauses to give meaning room to breathe. Pauses are one of the most underused tools in communication. Many fear silence, thinking it signals weakness, but silence signals composure. It gives the listener space to process, creates anticipation, and shows confidence. A pause after an important point allows that point to land. A pause before a point creates curiosity. Skilled communicators are not afraid of silence. They use it as punctuation. The highest level of nonverbal communication is presence. Presence is not merely posture or tone. It is the energy you bring into the room. It is how grounded you appear, how attentive you are, how much space you occupy mentally and emotionally. Presence is built through stillness, not through noise. People with presence do not fidget constantly, rush through speech, or scatter their attention. They make the other person feel like they are the only one in the room. This kind of presence commands respect without demanding it. Presence also requires control over your internal state. If your mind is chaotic, your presence is chaotic. When you learn to regulate your inner world, your outer world communicates stability. Stability makes people trust you, makes them listen, makes them follow. Leadership communication is built on presence long before it is built on persuasion. Alignment is key. When body language, tone, and words point in the same direction, communication feels cohesive and authentic. When they clash, for example, apologizing while rolling your eyes, or saying, "I am confident," with a hesitant tone, communication feels confusing or suspicious. Misalignment creates distrust. Nonverbal communication affects influence profoundly. People are more likely to take direction from someone who radiates calm authority, open up to someone who radiates warmth, and cooperate with someone who radiates respect. The goal is not to fake these qualities, but to embody them. You embody them by managing your attention, regulating your nervous system, and entering conversations deliberately rather than reactively. This is the essence of true charisma, a magnetic presence built on genuine engagement and emotional attunement. You do not need to memorize a catalog of gestures. The goal is awareness. When you become aware of what your body is saying, you gain control over how your message is experienced. Communication is not just about speaking smarter. It is about showing up smarter. And the way you show up can speak louder than any word you say. Chapter 3: The Lens of Perception, Framing Reality, and Navigating Bias. Communication would be deceptively simple if people always interpreted information exactly as it was intended. But humans do not hear what was said. They hear what they think was said. They filter information through their unique mosaic of experiences, insecurities, desires, fears, memories, and deeply held assumptions. This means that every message has two distinct versions. the one you sent and the one the listener received, and those two versions are rarely identical. The gap between them is where misunderstanding, conflict, and confusion are born. To communicate powerfully, you have to understand that people do not respond to objective reality. They respond to their perception of reality. This is where human biases enter the picture. Biases are mental shortcuts the brain uses to process complex information quickly. They are not flaws in our cognitive architecture. They are survival mechanisms, remnants of our evolutionary past, designed to make rapid judgments. However, they affect communication deeply. For example, confirmation bias makes people selectively hear what supports their existing beliefs and ignore what does not. Negativity bias makes negative information feel louder and more threatening than positive information, causing us to overemphasize risks. Ego protection bias makes people reinterpret comments to protect their self-image, even if no harm was intended, turning constructive feedback into perceived criticism. You do not need to become a psychologist to understand biases. You just need to remember that the mind is constantly editing incoming information. When someone hears feedback, their mind might translate it as judgment. When someone hears a suggestion, their mind might translate it as criticism. When someone hears a request, their mind might translate it as pressure. The wise communicator anticipates these distortions instead of being surprised by them. As the philosopher Epictetus taught, it is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Similarly, in communication, it is not just what is said, but how it is perceived. Assumptions add another insidious layer. Humans rarely ask for clarification. Instead, they guess meaning to fill gaps quickly. They assume tone, assume intent, assume context, and assume subtext, especially when the relationship has an emotional history. If someone already believes you criticize them, even neutral comments may sound like critiques. If someone already trusts you, even sharp feedback may sound constructive. The listener's prior narrative inevitably modifies your current message. This is why misunderstandings escalate so fast. Conversations do not collapse because of facts. They collapse because of interpretation. And interpretation is profoundly shaped by bias. For example, imagine you tell a coworker, "We should finish this sooner, so we are not rushed later." You might intend helpful coordination. They, however, might hear control, criticism, urgency, blame, or pressure. 5 interpretations from the same sentence. The meaning is not solely in the words. It is in the mind of the listener. To navigate assumption gaps, you must adopt a mindset of clarity over cleverness. Communicators get into trouble when they assume that what is obvious to them is obvious to everyone else. But people do not share your inner context, your thought process, your emotional state, or your private logic. If you do not make these things explicit, people will create their own version of them, often to your detriment. Another factor that shapes interpretation is ego. Humans have an instinctive need to feel competent, respected, valued, and right. When communication threatens one of those needs, even unintentionally, the brain shifts into defensive mode. You can observe it in their body language: crossed arms, tense shoulders, short answers, a raised voice, avoidance, or sarcasm. Defensiveness is not always a sign of disagreement. Often, it is a sign that ego is trying desperately to protect itself. Skilled communicators do not attack ego. Instead, they create conditions where the ego does not feel at risk. Perspective taking is the tool that bridges assumption gaps. It does not mean agreeing with the other person. It means understanding how the world looks from their side of the table. When you see their perspective, you can adjust your delivery without abandoning your message. For example, instead of saying, "You are doing it wrong," you can say, "Would you like to try a different approach that might make this easier?" The content is similar, but the framing removes the threat to competence. The ego stays intact, so the mind stays open and receptive. Bias awareness also helps you avoid escalating small problems into big ones. Negativity bias, for instance, makes people pay more attention to what went wrong than what went right. If you provide only corrections, the listener may feel attacked, even if your intention was purely improvement. A simple adjustment, like acknowledging what worked well before discussing improvements, can neutralize negativity bias and reduce resistance. People learn faster when they do not feel like they are losing status. There is a powerful principle here. Communication quality increases when interpretation effort decreases. The more the listener has to guess, infer, and decode, the more vulnerable the message becomes to bias, ego, and assumption. The less they have to guess, the cleaner and more effective the communication becomes. You can use clarifying phrases to reduce assumption gaps. Here is what I mean. Here is why I'm mentioning this. I am sharing this to help, not criticize, or I want to make sure we are on the same page. These small phrases create psychological safety. They manage interpretation proactively instead of reactively. Great communicators do not wait for misunderstandings. They actively prevent them. Ultimately, mastering communication requires acknowledging a simple truth. Humans are meaning-making machines. They do not just hear words, they build stories around those words. Some stories empower the conversation. Some stories distort it. Your job is to guide the story the listener builds. And that begins by understanding the biases, assumptions, and internal narratives they bring to the table. When you honor the psychology of perception, your communication becomes not just clearer, but smarter, kinder, and far more effective. Chapter 4. The Emotional Compass. Communicating with Precision and Attunement. Every message you send carries two distinct layers: the explicit information you deliver and the implicit emotion beneath it. People do not just absorb your words, they absorb how those words make them feel. Emotion is the silent, yet profoundly powerful, partner of communication. It shapes tone, influences interpretation, imprints memory, and dictates reaction. Yet most people communicate emotionally, by accident, letting their feelings spill out unfiltered. Powerful communicators, however, communicate emotionally, by intention. They neither suppress emotion or unleash it recklessly. They direct it with precision, much like a skilled mariner navigates the currents. Emotional precision begins with deep emotional awareness. You cannot control what you cannot recognize. Many people enter conversations without realizing what emotional state they are carrying. They speak from irritation without noticing the irritation, from anxiety without acknowledging the anxiety, from insecurity without labeling it. When the emotion is invisible to us, it becomes uncontrollable, and when it is uncontrollable, it becomes the hidden author of our message, dictating tone and word choice without conscious permission. As the Stoics understood, self-awareness is the first step to self-mastery. Emotional awareness is simply the ability to pause internally and ask, what am I feeling right now? And how do I want that feeling to shape my communication? Neuroscience shows that when you name an emotion, I am feeling overwhelmed, I am feeling defensive, I am feeling pressured, the emotional intensity decreases. The brain shifts from a reactive state to an observational one. Observation creates distance, and distance gives you choice. You no longer speak from the emotion. You speak about the emotion. That difference, though subtle, is transformative. It is the core of emotional regulation. Furthermore, this internal awareness helps prevent emotional leakage, a fatal communication mistake, where your internal emotional state unconsciously affects your communication. If you are nervous, anxious, insecure, or desperate, these emotions leak out through your voice, tone, body language, and word choice, even when you are trying to hide them. People can sense this immediately, and it destroys credibility. Emotional precision also requires recognizing the emotion of the listener. Humans rarely articulate how they truly feel during communication. They express emotions indirectly through a myriad of cues: tone, posture, speech speed, hesitation, avoidance, or defensiveness. A person saying, "I am fine," with a closed posture and clipped words is clearly not fine. A person nodding quickly may not be agreeing. They may be trying to escape discomfort. A person smiling through tension is not relaxed. They are hiding anxiety or frustration. Emotional cues are an integral part of the communication, even when words deny them. To communicate with precision, you must respond to emotion, not just to language. If someone is defensive, pushing facts harder will not help. Their brain is not in logic mode. It is in protect mode. The skilled communicator softens the emotional environment before continuing the logical argument. They might say, "I am not trying to criticize you. I am trying to make this easier for both of us." That small acknowledgement relaxes the protective instinct and reopens the listening channel. This is the essence of emotional attunement, a key component of charisma, sensing and responding to others' emotional states in ways that make them feel heard and supported. Another aspect of emotional precision is regulating your own emotional delivery. Emotion profoundly influences tone, and tone profoundly influences meaning. A sentence delivered with warmth invites cooperation. The same sentence delivered with tension triggers resistance. "We need to talk" can feel threatening if spoken abruptly, but supportive if spoken calmly. "I disagree" can feel like an attack or an invitation, depending on tone. "Let us fix this" can feel empowering or demanding. Emotion gives your words their texture. When you control your emotional texture, you control how your message lands. However, emotional precision does not mean being emotionless or robotic. It means being intentional. A message delivered with compassion can heal. A message delivered with confidence can inspire. A message delivered with calm authority can de-escalate conflict. A message delivered with enthusiasm can energize. Emotion is a powerful tool when expressed deliberately. The key is to choose the emotion. It matches your communication goal, rather than letting whatever emotion you feel spill out unfiltered. Timing also plays a critical role. Emotions fluctuate throughout a conversation. If you address a sensitive issue the moment the other person is reactive, their emotional state becomes the filter for everything you say. In that moment, even good intentions can sound threatening. Emotional precision means waiting for the right emotional moment, when there is space, calmness, and psychological readiness. Sometimes the best emotional strategy is patience. Let the emotion settle before the message enters. Empathy is another core element. Empathy does not require agreeing with the other person. It requires understanding their emotional landscape. When you acknowledge emotion, "I see why that upset you. I understand why you felt pressured. I know this is difficult to talk about." You create a safe space. People relax when they feel seen, and when they relax, they listen better. Empathy is not weakness. It is profound influence. It converts emotional tension into emotional cooperation. Being emotionally precise also protects your own boundaries. If you communicate without emotional precision, you may overshare, overcommit, or overjustify. When you feel guilty, you overexplain. When you feel insecure, you soften your message too much. When you feel angry, you push your message too hard. Emotional precision keeps you grounded, allowing you to ask, "What do I want to express? What do I not want this emotion to distort?" It allows you to hold confidence without aggression, firmness without harshness, and vulnerability without instability. Ultimately, emotional precision transforms communication from chaotic to intentional. It reduces misunderstandings, builds trust, and deepens connection. When people feel emotionally safe in your presence, they open up, they become honest, cooperative, and engaged. And you, in turn, become someone who is easy to listen to, easy to trust, and easy to follow. Great communication is not about perfect words. It is about aligned emotion. When your emotion, your intention, and your message work together, people do not just hear you, they feel you. And that is when communication becomes powerful enough to influence, heal, persuade, and inspire. Chapter 5. The Power of Simplicity. Speak clearly, not cleverly. One of the biggest, yet most common, mistakes people make in communication is trying to sound impressive instead of trying to be understood. They use complex language, long, convoluted sentences, and abstract explanations because they mistakenly believe that sounding smart will make them appear credible. But in reality, communication consistently rewards clarity, not cleverness. People are instinctively drawn to what they can immediately grasp, not what they have to laboriously decode. When you make your listener work too hard to understand you, they do not just struggle, they stop trying. Their attention shifts, their patience shrinks, and their interest inevitably fades. Clarity keeps their mind open. Complexity pushes it away. Clarity begins with simplicity, but simplicity does not mean shallow. This is a crucial distinction. The most intelligent communicators are not those who can articulate complex ideas in complex ways, but those who can break down complex ideas into clean, digestible, and easily understood explanations without losing any essential meaning. That requires more understanding on the part of the communicator, not less. Anyone can make something sound complicated. It takes real mastery, a profound grasp of the subject, to make it sound simple. Think of the great teachers throughout history, from Socrates clarifying philosophical concepts with simple questions to great scientists like Richard Feynman, renowned for his ability to explain quantum physics in accessible terms. They did not overwhelm you with jargon. They gave you language that made sense, language that stuck, language that guided you to insight. To speak clearly, you must first think clearly. As the ancient Roman orator Quintilian observed, if you do not think clearly, you cannot speak clearly. A mind that is tangled will inevitably produce tangled speech. Before you talk, ask yourself, what is the single undeniable point I am trying to make? That question alone can save entire conversations from drowning in a sea of unnecessary explanation. A single clear point, delivered with precision, is far more effective than 5 scattered, vague ones. When you refine your point, the listener can follow you effortlessly. When you scatter your point, the listener gets lost in the fog, unable to discern the true path. Another key to clarity is structure. Communication becomes messy and disorienting when people jump from idea to idea without logical transitions. They might start in the middle, jump to the beginning, skip to the end, and then loop back to something they forgot. The listener feels like they are riding a train without tracks, unable to anticipate the next turn. Structure gives the listener orientation. A simple pattern, such as what happened, what it means, what we should do, is often enough to organize even complex conversations into a coherent narrative. Clear speech also requires eliminating unnecessary verbal clutter. Filler language, like, you know, basically, kind of, sort of, makes speech softer, weaker, and less assertive. It signals uncertainty, even when you are not uncertain. These verbal crutches dilute your message and undermine your credibility. Far more powerful than fillers are intentional pauses. A pause communicates confidence. It gives the listener space to process what you have said, and it gives you time to select even better, more precise words. Many people fear direct language because they confuse directness with harshness or aggression. But directness is not aggression. It is respect. It respects the listener's time, intelligence, and attention. Saying, "I need help with this project," is clear, concise, and respectful. It is far clearer than saying, "I was thinking that maybe if you are not too busy, perhaps you could possibly take a look at it." Notice how the second version hides the message under layers of hesitation, hesitive language, and self-doubt. The listener has to dig to find the actual point. In communication, the more digging required, the more likely the meaning gets lost or distorted, leading to what Video 2 called information dumping, overwhelming others with data, making it harder for them to understand and agree. Tone also critically affects clarity. If your tone is too timid, the listener may miss your intention altogether. If it is too rushed, the listener may miss crucial details. If it is too monotone, the listener may miss your emphasis, losing the hierarchy of importance in your message. Speaking clearly is not only about what you say, but how you land it. Pace matters, emphasis matters, volume matters. These are not theatrical tricks. They are powerful tools that guide attention. A well-timed slowdown signals importance. A slight lift in tone signals a key idea. A brief pause signals completion, allowing the previous point to resonate. To speak clearly, you must also actively avoid ambiguity. Ambiguity breeds confusion and frustration. When you give vague instructions like, "We will handle that later," or "do it the way you think is best," the listener may interpret them drastically differently than you intend. In personal context, ambiguity leads to assumptions and unspoken resentments. In the professional context, it often leads to costly mistakes and wasted effort. Replace vague statements with concrete ones. "Let us schedule a meeting for tomorrow at 10 o'clock a.m., or use the same report format as last week's. Precision prevents misunderstanding. Clarity also involves choosing the right level of detail. Too much detail overwhelms and drowns the main point. Too little detail leaves critical gaps and invites assumptions. Skilled communicators master the art of adjusting the level of detail based on the listener and the context. A technical expert may require more granular detail. A busy executive may require a concise, high-level summary. A friend discussing an emotional issue may require depth and nuance instead of speed. Clarity is not one size fits all. It is tailored to context. Another important piece is recognizing that clarity is not only about delivering a message, but also confirming it was received and understood. After explaining something, a simple confirmation such as, "Does that make sense?" or "Should I clarify any part of that?" keeps the communication loop intact. It prevents silent confusion, where people pretend to understand when they do not. This clarification saves time, energy, and critically, preserves relationships by preventing future problems stemming from misinterpretation. Ultimately, speaking clearly is an act of service. It removes friction from communication. It preserves the listener's attention. It honors their intelligence and time. Cleverness often serves the ego. Clarity consistently serves the purpose. And when your communication consistently serves the purpose, people listen to you more closely, trust you more easily, and follow you more willingly. Speaking clearly is not about simplifying your intelligence. It is about amplifying your impact. Chapter 6. The Listener's Advantage. Influence through deep listening and strategic questions. Most people mistakenly believe that the way to become a powerful communicator is to say more, talk more, explain more, argue more. But true communication mastery does not begin with talking. It begins with listening. Influence begins with listening. Understanding begins with listening. Connection, respect, persuasion, and trust, all of these fundamental pillars of effective interaction, begin with deep, intentional listening. When you resist the urge to talk first, you gain access to the information that truly matters. how the other person thinks, what they value, what they fear, what they expect, and crucially, what they need to hear. Without that invaluable information, your words are merely guesses. With it, your words become precise, surgical, and profoundly impactful. Listening is not a passive behavior. It is not simply the absence of talking. It is an active, demanding skill that requires focus, curiosity, and patience. When you listen well, you are not waiting for your turn to speak. You are not mentally rehearsing your reply. You are not preparing a counter-argument. You are simply absorbing, deeply and completely. You are studying the emotional tone, the subtle choice of words, the pacing, the hesitations, the emphasis, and the unspoken omissions. Human communication is saturated with signals, but you cannot perceive those signals if you are too busy transmitting instead of receiving. Listening also gives you immense leverage. When someone feels truly heard, they stop resisting. Their defensiveness lowers, their ego relaxes, their mind opens, and that opening is precisely where influence lives. Most people have never experienced being deeply listened to. When they do, they feel profoundly understood, and people, by their very nature, tend to cooperate with those who understand them. They argue with those who do not. This psychological truth alone makes listening a powerful form of strategic advantage. There is a profound psychological reason listening works. Humans are innate storytellers. They explain themselves, their world, their fears, motives, beliefs, blind spots, and desires through the narratives they construct and share. When you allow them to tell those stories uninterrupted, you are, in effect, being handed the blueprint for how to communicate with them effectively. If they consistently focus on control, then your subsequent communication should subtly speak to control. If their primary concern is safety, then frame your message around safety. If fairness is their core value, then address fairness directly. When you know what their mind is organized around, you know precisely how to align your message with their internal language. To listen well, however, you must consciously remove certain ingrained habits. One of these habits is interrupting. Interrupting breaks emotional rhythm. It signals, often unintentionally, "My thoughts matter more than yours." Interruption is not just rude, it is strategically unwise. Another habit to remove is premature advice giving. People do not always speak to be fixed. Sometimes they speak to be understood first. When you rush to offer solutions, they feel dismissed, rushed, and unheard. Advice should always follow understanding, never precede it. You also have to resist the urge to dominate silence. Many people feel intensely uncomfortable with silence and rush to fill it with chatter, but silence is valuable information. Silence often means the other person is thinking, processing, or searching for the right words. When you jump in too quickly, you interrupt their internal process. Powerful communicators allow silence because silence reveals. Silence draws out deeper answers, deeper feelings, and deeper clarity. If you fill silence, you get the surface version. If you allow silence, you often get the truth. As the ancient proverb suggests, silence is golden. Listening requires genuine curiosity. Curiosity is the powerful antidote to assumptions. Instead of assuming you know what the person means, ask. Ask about their intention. Ask about their meaning. Ask about what they really want. Questions create depth, and depth creates understanding. The mistake many communicators make is confusing familiarity with accuracy. Just because you have heard someone speak before does not mean you fully understand them. Curiosity keeps you from jumping to potentially damaging conclusions that erode trust. Listening also dramatically enhances persuasion. You cannot effectively persuade someone if you do not understand what they truly value. You cannot persuade someone if you do not understand what they fear. You cannot persuade someone if you do not understand what they are committed to protecting. Listening reveals the blueprint of persuasion. Once you know how their brain organizes reality, you can speak in a language they inherently respond to. To persuade someone who values freedom, you must show how your idea increases their freedom. To persuade someone who values certainty, show how your idea protects stability. Without listening, persuasion becomes a game of force. With listening, persuasion transforms into a game of alignment. True listening also strengthens relationships. Humans bond most deeply through being understood. We feel closest to those who listen most deeply. We instinctively distance ourselves from those who constantly talk at us. If you reflect on the people you trust most, chances are they are the ones who consistently make you feel heard. They do not just talk at you. They draw you out. They give you space. They let your inner world come to the surface. Communication is not just exchanging words. It is exchanging worlds. Listening is the essential bridge where those worlds meet. Listening also protects you from unnecessary conflict. Conflict often arises not from fundamental disagreement, but from profound misinterpretation. People fight over things they never needed to fight about because they never listened long enough to realize they were actually aligned, or at least partially aligned. When you listen first, you discover the shared territory. Once you locate that common ground, solutions become easier, calmer, and faster to achieve. Ultimately, listening is the highest form of respect you can offer in communication. When you genuinely listen, you are implicitly saying, your thoughts matter, your feelings matter, your experience matters. And in return, people willingly give you something priceless, their openness. When they open up, you gain influence. And when you gain influence, you can communicate with far greater impact. Influence begins not with your mouth, but with your ears. Chapter 7. The Persuasion Operating System. Aligning Values, Inspiring Action. Persuasion is often gravely misunderstood. Many people imagine it as a form of pushing, convincing, debating, or winning an argument, but real persuasion rarely involves force, almost never relies on pressure, and never requires manipulation. Real persuasion is the profound art of alignment, aligning interests, aligning incentives, aligning interpretations, and aligning desires. When persuasion truly works, it feels natural, cooperative, even beneficial. The other person does not feel defeated. They feel understood. They do not feel controlled. They feel empowered to choose. To persuade without force, you must begin with intent. Intent is the moral foundation of persuasion. If your intent is to win at any cost, you will inevitably manipulate. If your intent is to overpower, you will pressure. But if your intent is mutual benefit, persuasion transforms into a service instead of a weapon. It becomes a way of helping someone see what genuinely aligns with their own values and goals. Influence built on self-interest collapses quickly. Influence built on mutual interest, however, lasts and builds lasting relationships. The first step in ethical persuasion is understanding what the other person values. People do not make decisions based on what you value. They make decisions based on what they value. If you try to persuade a safety-oriented person with arguments about bold risk-taking, you will fail. If you try to persuade a freedom-oriented individual with arguments about structure and security, you will fail. Persuasion works when the message perfectly fits a listener's internal incentive system. That requires listening before speaking, observing before explaining, and asking before advising. As Marcus Aurelius suggested, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Similarly, waste no time arguing what someone should, want. Understand what they do, want. The second principle is creating alignment. Alignment means precisely showing how your idea helps them move towards something they already deeply want. Alignment reduces resistance because it feels like support, not conflict. A common persuasive mistake is trying to change what people want. Changing desires is extraordinarily difficult, perhaps even impossible. Changing paths to achieve existing desires is far easier. Instead of arguing for new desires, help them pursue their existing desires more effectively. If they value efficiency, show how your idea saves time. If they value status, show how it improves reputation. If they value connection, show how it improves relationships. When you speak a person's values back to them, persuasion becomes effortless. This is also where the principle of reciprocity activation comes in. When you genuinely provide value first, people feel psychologically obligated to return the favor. Another critical part of persuasion is reducing threat. The human brain is designed to protect its beliefs, identity, and sense of competence. When persuasion threatens any of those, even subtly, resistance spikes. This is why arguments escalate. Each side defends not just their opinions, but their very identity. Skilled communicators avoid identity threats. Instead of saying, "You are wrong," they say, "There might be another way to look at this." Instead of saying, "You should," they say, "Here is what I have noticed works well." Small changes in phrasing can prevent psychological confrontation. Once the ego is calm, the mind becomes receptive. Choice is another powerful element. Humans instinctively resist losing control. If a suggestion feels like a command, the listener pushes back, even if the suggestion is beneficial. Triggering control-based resistance. Offer options instead of demands. "You could try this, or a combination of both." Keeps autonomy intact. When people feel they have agency, they do not fight the message, they explore it, and exploration significantly increases adoption. Stories also play a transformative role in persuasion, as they engage emotions and make abstract concepts concrete. Humans are less defensive when they are watching someone else's story unfold. When you tell a story about a person who benefited from a certain choice, the listener imagines themselves in that position. Without feeling directly attacked, the story creates emotional distance and psychological safety. There is no direct pressure, no confrontation, no threat. The listener draws conclusions voluntarily. Persuasion becomes a discovery instead of a battle, and instruction without dominance. Joint problem solving is another powerful strategy. When persuasion is framed as collaboration, how will we make this better for both of us? The conversation shifts from opposition to cooperation. Cooperation is fertile ground for influence. It lowers defensiveness, fosters creativity, and encourages ownership. The question, "What do you think would make this work for you?" transforms persuasion from convincing to designing, and people support what they help design. This aligns with the consistency leveraging principle, where people feel a need to stay consistent with what they have contributed to. Timing matters too. You cannot persuade someone who is emotionally charged, scared, or feels attacked. Emotional readiness is a prerequisite for rational influence. A calm conversation at the right time always outperforms a passionate argument at the wrong time. When emotions stabilize, perspective widens, and my mind opens. This is also where genuine scarcity and urgency creation can be used ethically by highlighting real deadlines or limited opportunities rather than fabricating them. Finally, ethical persuasion ends with voluntary commitment. You do not have to push for commitment. When a message is aligned, respectful, and emotionally safe, the listener will often commit naturally. If they do not, forcing them is counterproductive. Influence is never about winning the moment. It is about winning the relationship. A relationship preserved is a channel of future influence. A relationship preserved is a channel of future influence. Persuasion without force is not weak, it is smart. It respects human psychology instead of fighting it. It works with ego instead of against it. It uses alignment instead of pressure. And because of that, it builds influence that lasts. Communication that pressures may win arguments, but communication that aligns wins people. And winning people always matters more. Chapter 8. The Narrative Thread. Telling stories that resonate and transform facts inform the mind, but stories move the heart. And when the heart moves, the body naturally follows. Stories are one of the oldest and most potent communication tools humans possess. Long before there were books, speeches, or elaborate presentations, there were stories told around flickering fires, passed down through generations. These narratives taught values, preserved knowledge, united tribes, and built entire cultures. From the parables of ancient sages to the epic sagas of heroes, stories have always been the primary vehicle for transmitting timeless wisdom and inspiring collective action. The reason stories work is elegantly simple. The human brain is not wired to remember isolated data points. It is wired to remember narrative. It is wired to remember emotion. It is wired to remember meaning. When you learn to communicate through story, you gain access to a part of the brain that logic alone cannot reach. Storytelling is not merely about entertainment. Though entertainment can be a powerful amplifier, entertainment is optional. Meaning is essential. Story carries context, emotion, purpose, and, most importantly, a lesson. When people tell you they understand what you are saying, but do not change their behavior, it is often because they understood intellectually, not emotionally. Stories are the alchemists of communication. They convert intellectual understanding into emotional resonance, and emotional resonance is what creates action. A good story, effectively told, accomplishes three crucial things. First, it creates connection. The listener sees themselves, their struggles, or their aspirations reflected in the narrative. They feel a sense of recognition, a shared human experience. Second, it creates clarity. It simplifies a complex concept, an abstract idea, or a dense data set into something visible, concrete, and easily digestible. Think of the complex economic theories made understandable through a simple analogy or a historical anecdote. Third, and perhaps most powerfully, it creates commitment. It inspires a desire to do something, to think differently, or to change course. Stories transform abstract ideas into lived experiences. Instead of saying, consistency matters, you tell a compelling story about a small daily action that, over time, produced a large, undeniable result. Instead of merely stating, communication is powerful, you tell a story about a pivotal moment when a single, well-chosen sentence changed the trajectory of a relationship or a career. The story itself becomes the irrefutable proof. Stories do not need to be grand, epic tales. They can be small, personal anecdotes, keen observations, or even borrowed narratives that resonate with universal truths. What truly matters is the lesson carried within. People often believe that storytelling must be dramatic, filled with conflict, triumph, or tragedy to be effective. But some of the most powerful stories are simple moments where insight was born. A brief conversation with a stranger that shifted perspective. A childhood memory that taught a lasting principle. A mistake that illuminated a critical lesson, or a sudden realization that arrived unexpectedly. If the insight is real and relevant, the story is valuable. To tell stories that influence, you must understand their underlying structure. Most compelling stories follow a natural rhythm: situation, struggle, resolution, and lesson. The situation sets the context. Where are we? Who is involved? What is happening? The struggle introduces tension. What challenge arose? What problem needed solving? What obstacle appeared? The resolution explains how the situation changed, what action was taken, what was learned, what outcome emerged. And finally, the lesson delivers the meaning. Why does this story matter? What timeless wisdom does it impart? Without the lesson, the story is merely a memory. With the lesson, the story transcends into wisdom, becoming a guide for future action. Emotion is the undeniable engine of storytelling. The listener must feel something: curiosity, hope, discomfort, inspiration, or recognition. Emotion is what locks the story into the mind. When people recall stories, they do not remember every minor detail, but they vividly remember how it made them feel. They remember the punchline, the turning point, the profound realization, the emotional tension, and the core message. Emotion turns communication into memory, and memory turns communication into lasting influence. Stories also profoundly humanize communication. When you share a story, you reveal a degree of vulnerability, not necessarily weakness, but authentic realness. Realness makes communication accessible, safe, and relatable. It makes listeners relax their guard. We trust people who feel human, not perfect. We trust people who share lessons learned, not just abstract instructions. A leader who only gives orders creates distance. A leader who provides context through a well-chosen story creates deep understanding. When people understand the why behind a directive, the what becomes infinitely easier to follow and commit to. Storytelling is also an extraordinarily potent tool for persuasion. Humans resist direct pressure but respond naturally to narrative because narrative allows them to draw their own conclusions. Instead of saying, "You should take this course of action," you tell a story of someone who took that very course and reaped significant benefits. Instead of saying, "This idea works," you tell a compelling story of how it worked. In a real-world scenario, the listener connects the dots themselves. When they reach the conclusion internally, there is no resistance because they arrive there voluntarily. Stories allow persuasion without force and instruction without dominance. Listening also dramatically improves storytelling. To tell relevant and impactful stories, you must understand what the listener truly cares about. A story that resonates deeply with an engineer may not resonate at all with an artist. A story that moves a parent may not move a teenager. Relevance exponentially increases impact. If you pay close attention to what people value, what their concerns are, and what motivates them, you can choose or craft stories that speak directly to those values. That is how communication becomes tailored, precise, and deeply influential, instead of generic and forgettable. Once you master storytelling, you gain an advantage that extends far beyond business or leadership. You gain the profound ability to shape meaning. Humans are constantly trying to make sense of life, to find patterns and purpose in their experiences. Stories are how they do it. When you give someone a story, you give them a powerful model for understanding themselves and the world around them. A mentor who teaches through stories does not just give instructions. They give frameworks, and frameworks outlast instructions, providing enduring guidance. The true beauty of storytelling is that it does not require a special voice, dramatic flair, or inherent literary talent. It requires noticing the small, significant moments, noticing the lessons embedded in everyday life, noticing the universal threads of the human experience. When you tell stories that reveal fundamental truths, people lean in, they listen intently, they remember what you have said, and perhaps most importantly, they change. Communication that does not change anything is merely noise. Communication that uses story becomes signal. It becomes meaningful. It becomes transformative. Chapter 9. The Unspoken Command. Strategic silence and masterful timing. Communication is not only about what you say, it is also profoundly about what you do not say. Silence and timing are two of the most advanced, yet most feared tools in the communicator's arsenal. Most people fear them. They fear silence because it feels like emptiness, a void that must be filled. They fear pauses because it feels like weakness, an invitation for others to take control. They fear waiting because it feels like losing momentum or control. But silence and timing are not signs of weakness. They are unequivocal signs of mastery. When you learn to use them intentionally, deliberately, and with precision, you stop chasing attention and begin to command it. Silence creates space. Proper fosters to land, for emotions to settle, for meaning to surface and be absorbed. Most communicators rush their delivery, stacking words on top of words, hoping that sheer quantity will create impact. But impact is not created by piling information. Impact is created by allowing information to breathe, to resonate, to be fully processed. If you say something important and immediately continue talking, the listener does not have time to absorb it. They hear it, but they do not feel it. A well-placed pause transforms a mere idea into a profound moment. Silence also subtly, yet powerfully, shifts dynamics. In a conversation, the one who rushes to fill silence often holds the weaker position, not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack comfort with space. Powerful communicators are supremely comfortable with space. They do not panic when the room becomes quiet. Instead, they let the silence draw attention toward them, rather than away from them. In negotiation, strategic silence can prompt the other side to reveal more than they intended, pressured by the void. In teaching, a judicious silence can encourage students to think and grapple with a concept instead of passively expecting immediate answers. In leadership, a pause can make directions sound more deliberate, more weighty, and more authoritative. Silence is not absence. It is profound strategy. Timing is equally critical. Timing governs when to speak, when to ask a question, when to pause, and when to stop entirely. Two people can say the exact same sentence and produce completely different results simply because one said it at the wrong time. Timing determines emotional readiness. A brilliant idea delivered at the wrong emotional moment is a wasted idea. A correction delivered when the listener is highly defensive instantly becomes an argument. A thoughtful suggestion delivered when the listener is grateful or receptive becomes a collaborative breakthrough. Timing respects psychology. It respects that emotion and attention fluctuate. Rate communicators read the room by observing energy, posture, tone, and focus. When energy is tense, timing calls for patience. When energy is open and receptive, timing calls for clarity and directness. When energy is scattered, timing calls for an anchoring statement or a unifying question. When energy is fatigued, timing calls for brevity. Communication is not performed in a vacuum. It is performed within an emotional environment. Timing adapts to that environment rather than ignoring it. Silence also serves another vital function. It invites contribution. When you pause, the listener has room to respond, to think, to connect their own dots, to formulate their own insights. People often avoid silence because they fear awkwardness. But awkwardness is not a real threat. Awkwardness is simply unfamiliarity. In fact, some of the most profound and engaging conversations begin right after a pause that most people would have rushed to fill. Silence is a powerful signal to the listener that their input matters and that the conversation is not a monologue, but a valued exchange. Timing also significantly enhances persuasion. When persuading, The order in which you present ideas matters immensely. If you begin with conclusions before building context, the listener may immediately resist. If you build context first, resistance softens. If you ask open-ended questions early rather than late, the listener participates instead of passively observes. If you allow time for reflection, instead of pressuring for immediate agreement, commitment becomes voluntary and durable. Influence is not just what you say, but precisely when you say it. Another important form of timing is knowing when to stop. Many communicators inadvertently lose the impact of their most powerful point because they keep talking past the moment of maximum force. They repeat themselves, justify themselves unnecessarily, or over-explain out of insecurity. The result is dilution of their message. When you stop speaking the moment the point lands, you preserve its power. You leave the listener thinking, pondering, and internalizing instead of retreating into mental exhaustion. Great comedians know this. Great negotiators know this. Great teachers know this. They stop at the right moment, not when they run out of words, but when the idea has firmly taken root. Silence can also reveal truth. When someone is uncomfortable with silence, they often keep talking, sometimes inadvertently revealing information or intentions they did not intend to share. This is why skilled interviewers, astute negotiators, and insightful therapists all strategically rely on silence. After a challenging question, many people rush to answer before they fully think. Silence forces them to think, and from thoughtful reflection often comes genuine honesty. Silence extracts information that pressure cannot. However, silence does not work without composure. If your silence is filled with internal anxiety, the listener senses tension and discomfort. If your silence is filled with grounded confidence, the listener senses gravity, importance, and authority. Silence is a mirror. It reflects the internal state of the communicator. The more grounded and calm you are inside, the more powerful silence becomes outside. Presence fuels silence. Calmness gives it shape. Intention gives it direction. There is also cultural nuance in silence. In some cultures, silence is a sign of respect and thoughtful consideration. In others, it may be perceived as disagreement or even weakness. Truly skilled communicator adapts their use of silence to the cultural context without abandoning their core principles of grounded presence. Adaptation is not about changing who you are. It is about speaking in the language the audience understands. Timing and silence are integral parts of that universal language. Ultimately, controlling the room with silence and timing is about maturity. It is about recognizing that communication is not a race, not a competition, and not a performance designed to entertain. It is a deliberate process of exchange. When you slow that process, space opens. When space opens, attention sharpens. When the tension sharpens, influence increases exponentially. Silence is not empty. Silence is deliberate. Silence is commanding. Silence is persuasive. And timing, when mastered, transforms communication from mere noise into profound power. Chapter 10. The Authority Matrix. Commanding respect without aggression. Most people mistakenly think authority comes from being loud, aggressive, or dominating every conversation. They equate power with force and influence with intimidation. But real authority is the profound opposite. True authority is calm, controlled, and magnetic. It draws people in rather than pushing them away, and it cultivates genuine respect rather than fear or resentment. Understanding this critical distinction between authority and aggression is crucial because one consistently builds your influence while the other systematically destroys it. Authority is built on a bedrock of competence, confidence, and emotional control. When you possess genuine authority, people naturally defer to your judgment, actively seek your opinions, and willingly follow your lead. This occurs because true authority triggers an unconscious sense of respect and trust. People feel safe and secure around authoritative individuals because they sense that these individuals have profound control over themselves and their environment. Aggression, on the other hand, is born of force, intimidation, and emotional reactivity. Aggressive people might achieve temporary compliance, but they rarely earn genuine respect or willing cooperation. In fact, aggression often signals a deep-seated weakness, revealing a need to use force to get what you want, rather than earning it through demonstrable competence and strong character. As the ancient philosophers understood, true virtue is its own reward, and so too, true authority is self-evident. The first element of natural authority is emotional regulation. Authoritative people remain calm and controlled, even in the most stressful and challenging situations. They do not get defensive, angry, or flustered when challenged or criticized. This emotional stability signals profound strength, unwavering competence, and inherent leadership capability. When others witness your ability to maintain composure under pressure, they naturally view you as someone capable of handling significant responsibility and making sound decisions. Emotional regulation does not mean being motionless or robotic. It means being able to consciously choose your emotional responses rather than being controlled by them. Authoritative people feel emotions deeply, but they process them internally before responding. This allows them to respond strategically rather than reactively, leading to superior outcomes and exponentially increased respect. This is why, in crisis communication, managing your own emotional state is paramount. The second element is intellectual confidence. This means having well-thought-out opinions grounded in solid reasoning and being able to articulate them clearly and persuasively. Intellectual confidence manifests in how you present ideas, defend positions, and engage with opposing viewpoints. You are not afraid of intellectual challenges because you have done the rigorous work to develop informed perspectives. Intellectual confidence is distinct from arrogance. Arrogant people believe they know everything and dismiss other viewpoints without consideration. Intellectually confident people know what they know, and crucially, they acknowledge what they do not know. They are open to learning and changing their minds when presented with better information, but they do not waver on principles they have carefully considered and validated. The third element is purposeful communication. Authoritative people communicate with a clear, deliberate intention behind every word. They do not speak merely to fill silence or to be polite. When they contribute to conversations, they add genuine value through insightful observations, strategic questions, or information that propels the discussion forward. This purposefulness makes others pay rapt attention because they know that when you speak, it is invariably worth listening to. Purposeful communication also means being highly selective about when you speak. Authoritative individuals do not feel compelled to comment on everything or to prove their intelligence in every conversation. They speak when they have something meaningful to contribute and confidently remain silent when they do not. This judicious selectivity makes their words carry far more weight when they do choose to speak. The fourth element is boundary setting. Authority inherently requires clear boundaries about what you will and will not accept in terms of behavior, treatment, and communication. These boundaries are not aggressive or punitive. They are simply clear, non-negotiable statements about your standards and expectations. When people know precisely where your boundaries lie, they are far more likely to respect them and to respect you. Setting boundaries effectively requires calm consistency. You do not need to get angry or aggressive to enforce boundaries. You just need to be clear about the consequences of crossing them and follow through consistently. When someone crosses a boundary, you address it directly and matter-of-factly, without drama or emotional escalation. This demonstrates that you take yourself seriously and expect others to do the same. The fifth element is competence demonstration. Real authority is ultimately founded on a proven ability to consistently get results. People respect you when they see undeniable evidence that you know what you are doing and can deliver on your promises. This competence can be demonstrated through past achievements, current high-level performance, or clear expertise in relevant areas. Competence demonstration is not about bragging or showing off. It is about quietly and consistently proving your value through your actions and results. When people observe that you consistently deliver high-quality work, meet deadlines, solve complex problems, and add tangible value, they naturally begin to defer to your judgment and actively seek your input. This is a core aspect of building unshakable confidence. True confidence is rooted in real ability, not just external approval. The sixth element is strategic vulnerability. This might seem counterintuitive, but showing appropriate vulnerability actually strengthens authority rather than weakening it. Strategic vulnerability means being honest about limitations, acknowledging mistakes, and asking for help when genuinely needed. This demonstrates confidence and emotional maturity, not weakness. The key is that the vulnerability must be strategic and appropriate. Sharing every insecurity, doubt, or personal problem undermines authority. But acknowledging specific limitations or mistakes while taking full responsibility for them actually increases trust and respect. It demonstrates that you are honest, self-aware, and focused on results rather than merely protecting your ego. The seventh element is social calibration. Authoritative people deeply understand social dynamics and skillfully adjust their communication style to fit the situation without ever compromising their core principles. They instinctively know when to be more formal or casual, when to be direct or diplomatic, when to lead or support. This social intelligence allows them to maintain authority across vastly different contexts and relationships. Social calibration requires observing and understanding the unspoken rules of different social environments. What works effectively in a boardroom might not work at a casual family dinner. What is appropriate with peers might be perceived as disrespectful with superiors. Authoritative people navigate these differences skillfully while maintaining their authentic personality and values. Authority is not about dominating others or getting your way through sheer force. It is about earning respect through demonstrable competence, impeccable character, and profound emotional maturity. When you systematically develop genuine authority, people naturally want to follow your lead, actively seek your advice, and deeply respect your decisions. This creates influence that lasts and relationships that strengthen over time rather than deteriorating due to resentment or fear. It is the bedrock of true liberty, the ability to influence and lead not through coercion, but through earned respect and shared purpose. Chapter 11. Building Bridges, Trust, Rapport, and Authenticity. Trust is the indispensable gateway through which all meaningful communication must pass. Without trust, information is doubted, intentions are questioned, and motives are interpreted through a lens of suspicion. With trust, however, communication becomes smoother, easier, and profoundly more honest. People reveal more, listen more attentively, and cooperate more readily. Trust is not a luxury in communication. It is the absolute foundation, and like all robust foundations, it must be built deliberately, patiently, and with unwavering integrity. Rapport is the initial stage of trust. Rapport is that subtle, almost intangible feeling of ease and harmony you experience when you talk to someone, and everything simply flows. It is not necessarily about agreement. It is primarily about comfort and psychological safety. When rapport is high, people instinctively drop their guard. They stop performing, stop self-editing, and begin to tell the truth of their inner experience. When rapport is low, conversations remain stubbornly on the surface. People protect themselves, sharing only what is safe and nothing more. If your goal is to genuinely influence or lead, surface-level communication is entirely insufficient. You need access to real information, real thoughts, and real emotions. Rapport is what grants you that invaluable access. The first principle of building rapport is unwavering presence. Presence means giving your full, undivided attention to the person in front of you. Not partial attention, not distracted attention, and certainly not the kind of attention where you are listening with your ears, but mentally rehearsing what you will say next. Presence communicates profound respect. Presence communicates genuine care, and presence communicates unequivocally that the other person matters. Humans can sense, with remarkable accuracy, when they are being half listened to. They can also sense when they are being deeply received and understood. The difference, in terms of connection and trust, is enormous. This intense, focused presence is also a core component of charisma, making others feel important and valued. The second principle is subtle mirroring. Mirroring is the natural human instinct to unconsciously synchronize with people we like, admire, or feel safe with. We mirror their tone, their pace of speech, their posture, and their energy. This is not a manipulative tactic. It is a deep-seated biological mechanism of connection. Skilled communicators consciously mirror in a subtle, respectful way. If someone speaks slowly, you gently slow your own pace. If someone speaks enthusiastically, you add appropriate warmth and energy to your voice. If someone is reserved, you reduce your own intensity. Mirroring makes people feel understood without a single word of explicit agreement. It tells their nervous system, "We are similar. You are safe with me." Another vital part of building rapport is validation. Validation does not mean agreeing with someone's point of view or endorsing their actions. It means acknowledging their feelings or perspective as real, legitimate, and understandable from their standpoint. When you say, "That makes sense," or "I can see why that frustrated you," or "I understand why you felt pressured," you validate their inner experience. Validation powerfully disarms defensiveness. It lowers resistance. People often tense up not because they fundamentally disagree with you, but because they feel unheard, unseen, or judged. Once they feel seen and validated, disagreement becomes lighter and more rational, less emotional, and protective. Trust also increases exponentially when your communication consistently matches your behavior. Words create expectations. Behavior either confirms them or shatters them. Consistency is the immutable currency of trust. If you promise something and deliver, you deposit trust into the relationship account. If you promise and fail to deliver, you withdraw trust. Too many withdrawals, and the account closes, often irrevocably. In communication, inconsistency is especially damaging because it creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is inherently threatening to the brain. The more predictable you are in your tone, in your reactions, in your follow-through, the easier it is for people to connect with you and build trust. Authenticity plays an equally, if not more, important role. People can detect inauthenticity quickly, even if they cannot explain precisely how. Their intuition signals that something is off. Authenticity does not mean oversharing every private thought or insecurity. It means aligning your external expression with your internal reality. When your words, your motives, and your energy genuinely match, communication feels clean, transparent, and trustworthy. When they do not, communication feels like a performance. Performances can entertain, but they do not build lasting trust. Deep listening, as we have explored, also builds trust. When someone truly listens, they communicate that the other person's perspective matters profoundly. And when someone feels that their perspective matters, they relax emotionally. This emotional relaxation creates an environment where truth emerges more easily. Truth is the essential raw material of meaningful communication. Without it, you cannot effectively lead, persuade, or resolve anything. Humility strengthens rapport as well. Humility in communication means acknowledging that you do not know everything. It means asking genuine questions instead of making assumptions. It means openly admitting when you make mistakes or misinterpret something. Many people mistakenly believe that admitting uncertainty weakens credibility. In reality, it does the opposite. It signals confidence without ego, and confidence without ego is deeply trustworthy. This aligns with the strategic vulnerability concept from the authority matrix. Another underrated factor in trust is confidentiality. When people share something vulnerable, personal, or sensitive with you, they are implicitly testing your trustworthiness. If you betray that trust, even subtly, you inflict serious damage, not only to that specific relationship, but also to your broader reputation as a communicator. Trust is not just built through what you say, but through what you meticulously protect. The speed at which you build trust also depends on how well you manage judgment. Judgment shuts doors. Genuine curiosity opens them. When people sense that you are judging them, even silently, they withhold. They edit themselves. They give you the safe version of themselves instead of the real version. But when they sense that you are genuinely curious rather than judgmental, they bring their authentic self forward. Authenticity creates connection, and connection, in turn, creates profound influence. This is the essence of positive assumption, giving the benefit of the doubt. Finally, trust requires time, but not always as much time as people often think. When you consistently combine presence, validation, mirroring, curiosity, humility, and unwavering consistency, trust can grow surprisingly quickly. And once it grows, communication becomes easier, faster, and exponentially more productive. People do not just hear your words, they allow your words to truly matter. When trust is high, even difficult conversations become manageable. When trust is low, even simple conversations become arduous and fraught with difficulty. In communication, trust is not merely the goal, it is the fundamental starting point. Trust is the fertile soil in which influence grows. Without it, nothing takes root. With it, almost anything is possible. Chapter 12. The Boundaries of Liberty, Protecting Your Space and Setting Standards. Communication is not only about what you share and express, it is also, crucially, about what you do not allow. Boundaries are often spoken of in emotionally or therapeutic contexts, but few people truly recognize that boundaries are one of the most powerful communication tools available. Boundaries profoundly shape how others treat you, how far conversations are permitted to go, how respectful interactions remain, and how much mental and emotional space you preserve for yourself. Without clear, consistently enforced boundaries, communication becomes reactive, chaotic, draining, and ultimately unsustainable. With boundaries, communication becomes clear, respectful, and deeply sustainable, fostering true liberty in your interactions. Boundaries are simply clear standards for how you expect to be spoken to, treated, and engaged with. They are not threats. They are not ultimatums. They are not punishments. They are, fundamentally, communication guidelines. People who consistently lack boundaries often find themselves feeling misunderstood, used, or deeply resentful. This is not necessarily because others are always malicious, but because others were simply never explicitly told where the limits were. When limits are not communicated clearly, they will invariably be crossed. Communication requires not only clear expression, but also robust protection of yourself. To communicate boundaries effectively, you must first deeply understand what they protect. Boundaries protect your invaluable time, your precious attention, your finite emotional bandwidth, your fundamental dignity, and your core values. Time boundaries prevent people from indiscriminately consuming your day. Emotional boundaries prevent people from unilaterally unloading their emotional burdens without your consent. Respect boundaries prevent people from speaking to you in ways that degrade or diminish your self-worth. Value boundaries prevent you from compromising what matters most to your integrity and well-being. Without boundaries, communication becomes a perpetual negotiation between your essential needs and someone else's immediate urgency, inevitably leading to burnout and resentment. Expressing boundaries does not require aggression, confrontation, or anger. It requires calm, clear, and unwavering clarity. Instead of saying, "Stop bothering me," you might say, "I am available to talk about this after lunch. Right now, I am focused on this task." Instead of saying, "Do not dump your problems on me," you might say, "I need a heads up before heavy conversations, so I can be present for you." Boundaries do not need to attack, they need to inform. When boundaries are expressed calmly, respectfully, and with certainty, they are much harder to argue with and far easier to respect. As the philosopher John Stuart Mill articulated in his work on liberty, true freedom often relies on clearly defined limits that protect individuals from undue interference. Your personal liberty in communication is likewise defined by the boundaries you establish. There is also an important distinction between boundaries and walls. Boundaries keep communication healthy but productive. Walls block communication entirely. A wall says, "I will not engage with you at all." A boundary says, "I will engage, but not at the cost of my well-being, my values, or my peace of mind." People who build impenetrable walls often isolate themselves and lose influence. People who construct healthy boundaries maintain access and trust while effectively protecting their energy and preserving their internal liberty. Standards operate in a similar, complementary way. A standard is not about what you will not accept. It is about what you expect and aim for. Standards elevate communication, while boundaries protect it. Standards sound like, "I appreciate direct and clear communication," or "I value punctuality in our meetings," or "I prefer planning over last-minute changes." When you communicate your standards early and consistently, you proactively prevent conflict later. Many conflicts are simply the collision of unspoken, misaligned expectations. Speaking standards upfront reduces misalignment and fosters a more harmonious communication environment. Boundaries also significantly influence the tone of interactions. When you do not have boundaries around acceptable tone, others may speak to you sharply, dismissively, or disrespectfully. When you calmly state, "I am willing to discuss anything, but not while we are yelling," you fundamentally shift the container of the conversation. Now, the content may still be heated, but the process for discussing it remains respectful. This distinction is crucial. Boundaries are often more about process than content. You may disagree vehemently with what someone says, but the process for saying it must not violate your dignity or the shared standard of respect. Learning to say no is one of the strongest boundary tools in communication. No is not rejection, it is profound clarity. Without the ability to say no effectively, your yes becomes meaningless, diluted by obligation rather than authentic choice. When you say yes every request, every favor, every conversation, every crisis, you silently communicate that your time is endlessly available, your attention is cheap, and your priorities are perpetually negotiable. Boundaries restore scarcity to your resources. Scarcity, when managed gracefully, increases respect for your time and energy. Another essential skill within boundary communication is the judicious use of consequences, not punishments. A consequence is simply what happens naturally and logically if a boundary is continually ignored. For example, if we cannot discuss this calmly, I will need to step away until we can. Or, if we cannot stick to these deadlines, we will have to adjust the entire project timeline. You are not threatening. You are describing reality and the natural outcomes of choices. Consequence is boundaries' teeth without resorting to aggression. Boundaries also paradoxically improve relationships. Contrary to popular belief, boundaries do not push people away. They protect connection from the corrosive effects of resentment. Resentment is what truly damages relationships. Resentment grows silently when you overextend, overgive, or over-tolerate. Eventually, the relationship collapses under the immense weight of unspoken frustration. Boundaries prevent that collapse by keeping emotional accounts balanced and interactions equitable. In leadership, boundaries are absolutely essential. A leader without clear boundaries becomes overwhelmed, indecisive, and quickly disrespected. A leader with strong, clear boundaries, however, becomes a stabilizing force. Employees and collaborators know precisely what is acceptable and what is not. Meetings start on time. Expectations are transparently clear. Emotional chaos does not run the room. Leadership communication without boundaries is a slow, inevitable descent into burnout. Leadership communication with boundaries creates structure, respect, and fosters a climate of efficiency and mutual accountability. In personal life, boundaries help relationships remain voluntary instead of obligatory. When someone shares their time or energy with you because they want to, not because they feel pressured or guilted into it, intimacy becomes healthier, deeper, and more authentic. Boundaries protect both sides from taking each other for granted. There is one more immensely important aspect. Boundaries communicate self-respect. You do not have to announce your self-respect. You demonstrate it through what you consistently allow and what you definitively do not. People may not always instinctively know how to treat you, but they will quickly learn by observing what you consistently tolerate. When you hold boundaries calmly, clearly, and consistently, you effectively train people how to communicate with you in a way that honors your personal liberty and dignity. Ultimately, communication is not just about expressing ideas. It is about shaping the conditions for sustained, healthy connection. Boundaries and standards are those essential conditions. They create the robust container that keeps communication safe, respectful, and emotionally clean. Without them, influence becomes stressful, draining, and short-lived. With them, influence becomes sustainable, powerful, and a true exercise of personal liberty. Chapter 13. The Crucible of Connection. Navigating difficult conversations and conflict with calm power. Conflict is an inescapable facet of the human experience. It appears in families, friendships, workplaces, partnerships, negotiations, and even within our own internal dialogues. The mere presence of conflict is not a sign that communication has failed. It is rather a clear signal that communication is profoundly needed. What separates weak communicators from strong ones is not the absence of conflict, but how they consistently respond to it. Conflict handled emotionally becomes chaos. Conflict handled reactively becomes a rapid escalation, but conflict handled calmly and intentionally becomes an opportunity for resolution, deeper understanding, and stronger connection. Calmness is not passive weakness. Calmness is power under precise control, a deliberate choice in the face of emotional turbulence. When conflict arises, the first instinct for many people is to defend. Defense, almost inevitably, leads to offense. And offense, in turn, often leads to a destructive cycle where both parties are no longer genuinely trying to understand each other. They are simply trying to win. Winning becomes more important than clarity. Winning becomes more important than connection. And the strange, uncomfortable truth is that in communication, the very moment the goal becomes to win an argument, you have already lost. You have lost alignment, lost empathy, and lost access to the other person's mind and heart. Conflict handled through ego becomes a battle. Conflict handled through curiosity and presence becomes a constructive conversation. The indispensable foundation of calm conflict resolution is emotional regulation. Emotions are natural and valid, but they are notoriously terrible negotiators. Anger narrows perception, clouding judgment. Fear distorts risk, making rational assessment impossible. Pride rejects compromise, hardening positions, and insecurity searches for threat, turning neutral comments into perceived attacks. When these emotional distortions take over, words become weapons, accusations fly, tone sharpens, voices rise, and the real problem becomes buried under layers of emotional shrapnel. Emotional regulation is not suppression. Suppression merely pretends nothing is wrong. Regulation acknowledges emotion and then consciously chooses expression instead of uncontrolled reaction. This is the bedrock of crisis communication, managing your own emotional state under pressure to stabilize those around you. One of the most powerful tools in navigating conflict is slowing the pace. Conflict escalates quickly when the tempo accelerates. People talk faster, interrupt faster, breathe faster, and assume faster. This speed fuels tension, creating a volatile environment. Slowing down, however, creates space. Space for listening, space for reflection, space for choosing words deliberately instead of firing them impulsively. A slow, measured tone and steady pace communicate confidence and composure. They signal that you are not threatened and not eager to attack. That alone can significantly disarm a conflict-minded person. Listening, as we have already emphasized, is another crucial tool in conflict. Most arguments are not fueled by fundamental disagreement, but by profound misinterpretation. Two people can actually agree on a solution, but still fight for an hour because they never listened long enough to discover the underlying agreement. Listening is not surrender, it is astute strategy. It allows you to precisely identify whether the conflict is truly about content, what happened, process, how it happened, identity, what it means about me, or raw emotion, how I feel about it. Different types of conflicts require different responses. Without deep listening, you end up treating every conflict like a logic problem. But many conflicts are emotional problems dressed up as logical ones. Language choices also matter immensely. Blame language triggers immediate defense. Defensive language, in turn, triggers counterattack. Phrases like, "you always," or "you never," or "this is your fault," effectively place the other person in a corner. Cornered minds fight. Cornered egos fight even harder. Shifting from blame to perspective sharing softens the battlefield. Here is how I saw it, or here is how that impacted me, or here is what I was expecting. You are expressing your truth without accusing. You are sharing your experience without attacking. And you are keeping the conversation in the arena of reality and personal experience, rather than exaggeration or personal attack. Another important layer of conflict resolution is seeking shared ground before seeking solutions. Humans cooperate more easily when they feel aligned, even on a tiny point of agreement. We both want this project to succeed, or we both care about the outcome, or we are both frustrated with this situation. All reduce emotional distance. Agreement lowers tension, and once tension drops, solutions emerge far more naturally. Many conflicts collapse because both parties focus exclusively on their differences first. Great communicators flip the sequence. Align first, negotiate second. Curiosity is a powerful conflict tool as well. Asking questions like, "What part of this feels most unfair to you?" Or, "What are you worried will happen if we do it differently?" shifts the conversation from confrontation to exploration. Exploration activates the problem-solving regions of the brain. Confrontation activates defensive regions. The moment genuine curiosity enters the room, hostility loses its oxygen. Protection of dignity is another non-negotiable principle. Conflict becomes toxic when it fundamentally threatens identity. If someone feels stupid, inferior, disrespected, or humiliated, they will fight not for the argument, but for their very dignity. Even for life, even if you are factually correct, if you are wrong on dignity, the conflict will not resolve. Preserving dignity sounds like, "I respect your perspective," or "It makes sense why you would feel that way," or "You bring up a fair point." You are not surrendering your position. You are preserving the other person's humanity while defending your own. That is profound power. Sometimes, the smartest move in conflict is stepping back temporarily, not fleeing, not abandoning, but pausing. Heated minds do not produce good decisions. Pausing allows the emotional temperature to drop so the logical mind can re-enter the conversation. Saying, "Let us continue this when we have both had time to think," is not weakness. It is astute leadership. It signals that the ultimate goal is resolution, not victory or immediate gratification. This applies directly to the principles of crisis communication. Finally, conflict resolution requires knowing when to end the fight, not because you lost, but because nothing more constructive can be gained. Some conflicts are simply unsolvable because they are value conflicts, not detail conflicts. Some conflicts are ongoing because one side seeks harmony and the other seeks control. In those cases, calm power may mean setting firm boundaries rather than seeking an elusive resolution. Handling conflict calmly is not about never raising your voice or never disagreeing. It is about refusing to let emotion, ego, or fear hijack the conversation. Calmness gives you clarity. Clarity gives you strategy. Strategy gives you influence. And influence gives you the profound ability to resolve conflict without destroying connection. That is real power, and it rarely comes from force. It is a cornerstone of maintaining individual liberty within relationships and collective harmony. Chapter 14. The Chameleon's Code, Social Calibration and Digital Communication Mastery. The most sophisticated communicators possess an almost supernatural ability to read social situations and adapt their communication style accordingly. They seem to know exactly what to say, how to say it, and when to remain silent in any environment. This is not magic or some innate natural talent. It is a learnable, cultivated skill called social calibration, and it is the critical difference between being effective in one narrow context versus being truly powerful in every context imaginable. Social calibration is the profound ability to accurately assess the unwritten rules of any social environment and adjust your communication to work within those rules, while still achieving your objectives and maintaining your authentic self. Every social situation, from a formal boardroom to a casual family dinner, has invisible dynamics, subtle power structures, cultural norms, and emotional undercurrents that determine what kind of communication will be effective and what will inevitably backfire. Most people fail at social calibration because they employ the same communication approach in every single situation. They speak to their boss the same way they speak to their friends. They use the same tone in formal meetings that they use in casual conversations. They apply the same strategies in high-tension situations that they use in relaxed environments. This profound lack of adaptation severely limits their influence and frequently creates unnecessary conflict or resistance. The first element of social calibration is acute situational awareness. Before you open your mouth, you need to meticulously assess the environment you are entering. What is the formal hierarchy, and who holds the true decision-making power? What is the prevailing emotional climate? Are people stressed, relaxed, anxious, or excited? What are the cultural norms? And what behaviors are expected versus subtly prohibited? What is the time pressure, and how much depth versus efficiency is required? Situational awareness demands observing multiple channels simultaneously. You are reading body language, listening to tone patterns, noting who speaks and who remains silent, watching how people physically position themselves, and identifying who others defer to or seek approval from. This rich tapestry of information tells you how to position yourself and what communication style will be most effective. The second element is audience analysis. Different people respond to different types of communication, and effective calibration requires a deep understanding of your specific audience. Are they analytical people who prioritize facts and logic, or relational people who crave connection and emotion? Are they detail-oriented individuals who need comprehensive information, or big-picture thinkers who prefer summary and vision? Are they risk-averse people who require reassurance, or risk-tolerant individuals who respond to bold proposals? You can assess audience preferences through several indicators. Their professional background often predicts their communication preferences. Their questions reveal whether they think in details or concepts, problems or opportunities, safety or growth. The third element is power dynamics assessment. Every social situation possesses both formal and informal power structures that dictate how influence flows. Formal power emanates from titles, positions, and official authority. Informal power stems from relationships, expertise, social status, and personal charisma. Effective communication necessitates understanding both types of power and adapting your approach accordingly. When communicating with people who hold higher formal power, you typically need to be more structured, respectful, and results-focused. When communicating with people who wield informal power, you might need to be more relational, collaborative, and patient in building consensus. Understanding power dynamics also helps you avoid accidentally threatening or undermining powerful individuals. The fourth element is cultural competence. Every organization, industry, and social group possesses unique cultural norms that profoundly affect communication effectiveness. These cultures determine what topics are safe versus dangerous, what communication styles are respected versus rejected, and what behaviors signal competence versus incompetence. Corporate cultures, for example, vary dramatically in their communication preferences. Some value direct, confrontational debate, while others prioritize harmony and consensus. Misreading these cultural signals can rapidly destroy your credibility and influence. Cultural competence requires observing how successful people in that environment communicate and modeling their effective patterns while judiciously avoiding their mistakes. The fifth element is emotional intelligence calibration. Every social situation carries an emotional tone that affects how people receive and process communication. High-stress environments demand different approaches than relaxed ones. Celebratory situations call for different energy than problem-solving situations. Crisis moments, as we discussed, require specific strategies distinct from routine interactions. Emotional calibration means matching your energy and tone to the situational requirements while still maintaining your authentic personality. Everyone is stressed and urgent. You cannot be slow and casual without appearing disconnected. If everyone is formal and serious, you cannot be playful and irreverent without seeming inappropriate. The sixth element is strategic flexibility. Social calibration is not about becoming a chameleon who lacks a consistent identity. It is about being strategically flexible in your communication approach while maintaining your core values and objectives. You are adapting your methods, not your principles, your style, not your substance, your presentation, not your purpose. Strategic flexibility requires having multiple communication approaches in your repertoire, analytical when logic is needed, emotional when connection is crucial, assertive when leadership is required, and collaborative when consensus building is paramount. This range allows you to be effective across diverse situations and relationships. The seventh element is real-time adjustment. Social calibration is not just about correctly reading a situation at the outset. It is about continuously monitoring feedback and adjusting your approach as the situation evolves. People's moods change, power dynamics shift, and new information emerges. It demands communication strategy modifications. Real-time adjustment requires paying attention to micro-feedback signals. Are people leaning in or leaning back? Are they asking questions or remaining silent? Are they making eye contact or looking away? This feedback tells you whether your current approach is working or needs modification. Effective real-time adjustment also demands the emotional flexibility to change course without losing confidence or composure. Now, let us turn to digital communication mastery, an essential extension of social calibration in our modern world. The digital revolution has fundamentally reshaped how we communicate, yet most people are still using analog communication strategies in digital environments. This mismatch severely limits their influence. Digital communication removes many of the nonverbal cues that drive influence in person. Tone of voice, body language, facial expressions, energy levels, and physical presence are either completely absent or significantly diminished. This means you must become more skilled at creating influence through word choice, message structure, timing, and strategic use of available digital tools. The absence of immediate feedback also changes dynamics. You must anticipate reactions and craft messages that work effectively without real-time calibration. The first principle of digital communication mastery is platform optimization. Different digital platforms have different communication norms, user expectations, and algorithmic behaviors. What works on email does not work on social media. What works in video calls does not work in text messages. Platform optimization requires understanding the specific characteristics of each digital environment and adapting your style to match user expectations while maintaining authenticity. The second principle is attention capture and retention. Digital environments are intensely competitive for attention. Your digital communication must be designed to break through this noise and hold attention. This starts with compelling openings that signal value, relevance, or urgency. It continues with strategic formatting, short paragraphs, bullet points, bold text, and logical flow to make content easy to consume even when distracted. The third principle is emotional connection. Without physical presence, creating emotional engagement digitally requires more intentional effort. You must generate emotional engagement primarily through your content strategy and word choice, understanding and addressing your audience's concerns, aspirations, fears, and desires. Personal storytelling becomes even more important to humanize your digital presence. The fourth principle is credibility establishment and social proof integration. Digital environments allow people to easily research your background. Credibility comes from consistent, high-quality content that demonstrates expertise, professional presentation, social proof testimonials, recommendations, and transparent communication. The fifth principle is strategic timing and frequency optimization. Digital communication timing affects whether your messages are seen and acted upon. You need to understand when your audience is most likely to be online and receptive. Frequency optimization involves balancing visibility with avoiding annoyance or overwhelming your audience. The sixth principle is multimedia integration and visual communication. Digital platforms increasingly favor visual content. You must develop skills in creating and using images, videos, graphics, and other visual elements to support and enhance your written communication. Visual elements should enhance, not distract from, your core message. The seventh principle is engagement, cultivation, and community building. Digital communication is interactive. Building digital influence requires creating opportunities for meaningful engagement, asking questions, sharing content that invites discussion, responding thoughtfully, and facilitating connections among your audience members. Mastering social calibration and digital communication transforms you from someone who is effective in limited contexts to someone who can succeed in any environment. You become the person others rely on for important conversations, difficult negotiations, and high-stakes presentations because you have the rare ability to read situations accurately and communicate in ways that achieve results while maintaining relationships. Your expanded digital influence increasingly translates into real-world opportunities and offline relationship building as digital and physical communication become more integrated. This is the liberty of being a truly versatile and influential communicator. Chapter 15. The Unending Journey, Cultivating a Mastery Mindset, and Building Lasting Influence. Everything you have learned in this audiobook, every insight, every technique, every psychological principle, becomes utterly worthless unless you implement it systematically and consistently. Most people consume communication training, not in agreement, and then revert to their old habits within weeks because they lack a clear, actionable plan for transforming knowledge into automatic, ingrained behavior. This final chapter provides you with a systematic approach for implementing these principles, cultivating a mastery mindset, and ultimately transforming yourself into someone who commands every communication situation with confidence and impact. The implementation process requires far more than just trying to remember a few techniques during conversations. Real transformation happens when these principles become so deeply ingrained that you use them automatically, unconsciously, and without conscious effort. This level of integration demands systematic practice, structured feedback, and consistent refinement over months, even years, not merely days or weeks. Your communication revolution begins with an honest, unflinching assessment of your current abilities and a clear, compelling vision of where you aspire to be. Most people overestimate their communication skills and tragically underestimate the sustained effort required for genuine, dramatic improvement. This gap between perception and reality prevents them from embracing the systematic approach necessary for profound transformation. The first step is a comprehensive skill assessment across all the areas we have covered. Rate yourself honestly on first impression creation, authority projection, persuasion abilities, crisis communication skills, charisma development, and relationship building capabilities. Identify your strongest areas and, crucially, your biggest weaknesses so you can prioritize your improvement efforts strategically. This assessment should ideally include feedback from trusted colleagues, friends, and family members who have observed your communication in diverse contexts. Their perspectives often reveal blind spots that you cannot see yourself and will help you understand how others actually perceive your communication style and effectiveness. The second step is implementation, prioritization, and sequencing. You cannot improve everything simultaneously. Trying to do so leads to overwhelm and failure. Instead, Identify which improvements will create the biggest, most impactful leverage on your specific goals and circumstances. Consider your career objectives, your most pressing relationship needs, and your immediate communication challenges when deciding which skills to develop first. Start with foundational skills that underpin everything else before moving to advanced techniques. Emotional regulation and basic confidence are absolute prerequisites for effective influence and persuasion. Clear thinking and message organization support both formal presentations and casual conversations. These fundamental capabilities make every subsequent improvement easier and more effective. The third step is structured practice design and rigorous execution. Genuine improvement demands deliberate practice, not just casual effort during normal conversations. This means creating specific practice scenarios that actively challenge your abilities, provide clear feedback opportunities, and push you beyond your comfort zone in controlled, safe environments. Practice scenarios might include recording yourself presenting and meticulously analyzing your performance, role-playing difficult conversations with trusted partners, practicing influence techniques in low-stakes situations, or joining organizations like Toastmasters that provide structured feedback on public speaking skills. The key is that practice should be more challenging than your normal communication situations, so that real conversations feel easier rather than harder. You are building communication muscles through progressive resistance training, not just casual exercise. The fourth step is feedback system establishment and diligent use. You need reliable, consistent ways to assess your progress and identify areas that require continued work. This necessitates both formal feedback mechanisms and informal observation skills that help you learn from every single communication experience. Formal feedback might include regular check-ins with mentors or coaches, structured assessments from colleagues or supervisors, participation in communication training programs, or detailed video recording and analysis of important presentations or meetings. Informal feedback comes from developing acute sensitivity to how people respond to your communication. You learn to read engagement levels, notice when people seem confused or resistant, and observe whether your communication consistently achieves the outcomes you intended. This real-time feedback loop allows you to adjust your approach continuously, becoming a dynamic, responsive communicator. The fifth step is habit formation and automatic behavior development. The ultimate goal is not just to know communication techniques, but to use them automatically without conscious effort. This requires consistent repetition until new communication patterns become your default responses, rather than special techniques you have to remember to use. Habit formation works best when you focus on mastering one specific behavior at a time until it becomes automatic before adding new behaviors. You might spend weeks focusing solely on maintaining better eye contact before adding strategic pause techniques, or work on emotional regulation before practicing advanced influence methods. The key is consistent daily practice rather than intensive occasional effort. Small incremental daily improvements compound over months into dramatic transformations, while sporadic, intense practice sessions create only temporary improvement. The sixth step is real-world application and progressive challenge. Once you have developed basic competence through practice scenarios, you need to actively apply your new skills in increasingly challenging real-world situations. This might mean volunteering for presentations you previously avoided, taking leadership roles in difficult projects, or initiating important conversations you have been putting off. Progressive challenge means gradually increasing the stakes and difficulty of your communication situations as your skills improve. You start with low-risk situations where mistakes will not have serious consequences, and gradually work up to high-stakes communications where your refined skills can create significant opportunities or outcomes. This continuous expansion of your comfort zone is vital for sustained growth. The seventh step is continuous refinement and advanced development. Communication mastery is a lifelong journey, not a one-time achievement. Even after you have dramatically transformed your basic communication effectiveness, you can continue developing more sophisticated capabilities that create even greater influence and impact. Advanced development might include studying specialized influence techniques, developing deep expertise in specific communication contexts, like high-stakes negotiations or crisis management, or building thought leadership platforms that establish your reputation as a true communication expert in your field. This is the path of a lifelong student of human psychology, forever curious and always evolving. The eighth step is teaching and knowledge transfer. One of the most powerful and effective ways to deepen and solidify your own communication mastery is by teaching others what you have learned. Teaching forces you to organize your knowledge more clearly, identify any gaps in your own understanding, and develop better, more concise explanations for complex concepts. Teaching opportunities exist everywhere, from informal mentoring of colleagues to formal training sessions, peer coaching, or simply helping friends or family members improve their communication skills. These experiences help you understand communication principles more deeply, while simultaneously building your reputation as someone with valuable expertise to share. Knowledge transfer also involves documenting your learning and creating systems that allow others to benefit from your communication insights, truly building a lasting legacy. Your communication revolution culminates when these skills become so natural and automatic that you do not even think about them consciously during conversations. You simply communicate powerfully, effectively, and influentially because that is who you have become, not because you are trying to use specific techniques. This transformation takes time, effort, and consistent practice, but the results are extraordinary. You become someone who commands respect, influences decisions, builds strong relationships, and achieves profound goals through the sheer power of strategic communication. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to demonstrate your capabilities, create value, and build the relationships and reputation that support your long-term success and embody your personal liberty. The techniques in this audiobook have the power to transform not just how you communicate, but how others perceive you, what opportunities come your way, and what you are able to achieve throughout your career and life. But only if you implement them systematically, consistently, and with the unwavering commitment to continuous improvement that separates masters from amateurs. Your communication revolution starts now, with your very next conversation. The only question is whether you will commit to the process that creates extraordinary results, or settle for the modest improvements that come from casual effort. The choice, ultimately, is yours. And it will determine whether you join the ranks of truly powerful communicators or remain among the masses who struggle to be heard, respected, and influential. Conclusion: your communication legacy. Communication is far more than simply speaking well. It is more than choosing the right vocabulary or structuring sentences elegantly. Communication is, at its heart, how you reveal yourself to the world, how you think, how you influence, how you build trust, how you handle conflict, how you lead, and how you create profound meaning. Words are merely the surface, but psychology is the enduring foundation. And when you master both, you gain an unparalleled advantage that extends into every dimension of your life, a true expression of intellectual and social liberty. Throughout this audiobook, we have embarked on a comprehensive journey, exploring the deeper layers of powerful communication, the intricate parts most people never consciously study, but intuitively feel every single day. We examined how mental frameworks and self-awareness shape clarity, how framing shapes meaning, and how understanding human biases allows you to anticipate and navigate misunderstandings. We delved into the profound impact of emotional precision and attunement, recognizing that emotions are the silent partners of every message. We highlighted the critical importance of speaking clearly, not cleverly, and the transformative power of deep listening and strategic questioning. We mastered the unspoken language of body, tone, and presence, and discovered how powerful stories create emotional resonance and inspire action. We uncovered the art of ethical persuasion, aligning interests instead of forcing compliance, and learned how to build trust and rapport quickly and authentically. We explore how boundaries and clear standards are not barriers, but essential tools for preserving respect and personal liberty. We confronted the inevitability of conflict, learning to navigate it with calm power and dignity, even in crisis. We then extended our reach into the modern world, understanding social calibration and the unique dynamics of digital communication. Finally, we embraced the mastery mindset, recognizing that communication is a lifelong craft, an unending journey of continuous learning, adaptation, and refinement. These are not mere tricks, nor are they fleeting gimmicks. They are timeless, foundational tools for navigating the complex landscape of human behavior. Communication is not merely about expression. It is, above all, about connection to ideas, connection to emotions, and most importantly, connection to other human beings. When communication lacks connection, it becomes mere noise, easily dismissed, forgotten. But when communication gains connection, it becomes profound impact. Impact is the crucial difference between being heard and being remembered, between being understood and being followed, between merely offering advice and genuinely inspiring action. Mastering communication is also an act of profound responsibility. Your words possess the power to build someone up or to break them down. Your tone can calm a tempest or inflame a minor disagreement. Your strategic silence can soothe a troubled mind or subtly intimidate. Your questions can deepen understanding or expose a raw insecurity. In every single interaction, you carry influence, even when you do not consciously realize it. To communicate well is to use that influence intentionally, deliberately, and ethically, instead of accidentally or thoughtlessly. The great advantage of communication is that it compounds, accumulating value over time. A single skill applied today makes tomorrow's conversations smoother and more productive. A boundary wisely set today prevents future conflict and resentment. A listening habit formed now improves relationships for years to come. A shift in framing makes negotiations smoother and arguments shorter. Communication skills repay effort endlessly. They travel with you wherever you go, into workrooms, living rooms, boardrooms, friendships, partnerships, and those pivotal moments where your entire future is shaped by a single, well-chosen sentence. But perhaps the most important truth, the core message to take with you, is this: powerful communication truly starts inside. If your mind is unclear, your communication will inevitably become chaotic. If your emotions are unregulated, your communication will be reactive and erratic. If your ego is fragile, your communication will become defensive and guarded. If your curiosity is absent, your communication will remain shallow and superficial. The stronger, more grounded, and more self-aware your internal world becomes, the exponentially more effective your external communication will be. Mastering communication, then, is inseparable from mastering yourself. It is a journey of self-discovery and self-mastery, leading to a deeper understanding of both yourself and others. This audiobook is not the end of your journey. Communication is a lifelong craft that demands continuous engagement. You will refine it every single time you ask a better question, listen a little longer, reframe a difficult conversation with grace, Express a boundary calmly. Adapt your tone to the situation. Pause strategically. Or tell a story that genuinely moves someone to act. Growth happens in moments, subtle, small, and continuous. Speak smart, not to impress, but to connect, not to dominate, but to align, not to overwhelm, but to clarify, not to control, but to influence. Communication done well does not make you louder, it makes you profoundly more effective. Influence does not live in volume, it lives in deep understanding. Your words will shape the opportunities you receive, the relationships you build, the conflicts you resolve, the leadership you express, and the lasting impact you leave on the world. Every conversation is a chance to practice. Every interaction is a chance to refine. And every day offers countless moments to communicate with more intention, more presence, and more intelligence. In a world increasingly full of noise, the ability to communicate with clarity, calmness, and power is not just an advantage, it is a profound form of leverage. Use it wisely, use it consistently, and let it elevate the way you think, the way you lead, and the way you connect with others, forging a legacy of meaningful and influential communication.